Hello and welcome to Energized. I'm Jason Mann. This is Jim Czek, and our goal with Energized is to share information that will get people a better understanding of the move to a more abundant world where electrification and AI are the pillars of a better tomorrow. Obviously, there's a lot of potential pitfalls on that path, but there's also a lot of upside, and there's a ton of news to stay on top of.
Well, that was sounding really good until you got down to the pitfalls. Sounded really interesting.
Well, I think there'll be some benefits
tomorrow, and all of a sudden, here's all the pitfalls.
He'd be the optimist.
There you go. We're going to show you this stuff, but it has a lot of pitfalls. It has, no. One of the things that we're trying to dispel a lot of the misconceptions out there. That's one of the premises of the show, because there's a lot of misconceptions as to what's going on with EVs, electrification, AI, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's
the electrical grid and the capabilities of
all
that
kind of stuff. Because I think there's two different things going on here. So everybody's probably seen that BlackBerry movie, the story of BlackBerry, and the iPhone moment. Because BlackBerry was one of Canada's #1 stocks, RIM,
one of the world's
RIM technology, right? So the president of the United States, every world leaders all had like BlackBerries in their hands. And then this Steve Jobs did that iconic introduction of the iPhone, and it was, I think he introduced it. It's a phone, it's a music device. What was the other thing? There was three things. It's a phone, it's a music device. I can't remember the third thing. But the iPhone was everything. Because Nokia was a big company, BlackBerry was a big company, and then people said they competed with the iPhone. They competed with the iPhone itself, the phone part of it, but not with the rest of the iPhone, right? So
there was no competition.
Like Nokia, was a flip phone.
The BlackBerry, it had app capabilities, but it was an open market. The video was way worse.
It was. I had both. I had the 8380. And the first iPhone, and I was showing people just like, look at the difference between these two. Like, you can surf the web on the 8380, but just, you wouldn't, right? It's just, you wouldn't. And the same thing goes for like Tesla versus a lot of the other EVs out there right now, because Tesla's not just an EV. Tesla's an autonomous, it will be an autonomous car. It's a lot more about AI and a lot more about energy.
And software, right?
And software, yeah. It's a computer on wheels, really, right? So the adoption rate, though, worldwide. This is there's a chart here put out by the Rocky Mountain Institute that shows where they think EV adoption will take place, and they're projecting 2030 as where it crosses over, and more EVs are sold than ICE cars. And there's two kind of charts there. There's the fast and faster adoption rate. And you can kind of see there that it crosses over in fast in 2030 at 50%, and then it's at a higher number at a faster adoption rate. And I think we have another chart there, Marcy, that shows you some of the countries that are already way past that. And of course, the Scandinavian countries are leading, right? And people will say automatically, oh, you can't drive EVs in the cold. Well, Norway, Iceland, Sweden, Denmark, they all share climates, Finland, climates that are probably as colder than some parts of Canada.
Are they, what kind of supply? We've had a supply. So when I bought my Kona, the local dealership had 500 people waiting for this Kona.
Yeah. But that shortage is kind of gone now, right? Like, you know what I mean? A lot of lots are now sitting with cars.
Yeah, but how did these other countries sort of eclipse us when it hasn't been that long? I mean, it's only been a year.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, China has 100 EV makers, and China's supplying a lot of Europe with EVs, whereas Canada, like Ford and GM, the big three, and Stellantis, are just getting into EVs. I mean, Chevy had the Bolt, but they're discontinuing the Bolt. So, and Tesla is ramping up. I mean, this year they're going to bang on the door of 2 million cars sold worldwide. The #1 selling car in the world right now, not EV, the #1 selling car in the world right now is the Model Y. It's not. They finally overtook the Toyota Camry, which held that spot forever. So it's changing. Like, I think, like, the big thing is, I think a lot of people look at it as a political stance, and they see it as, oh, it's the people that are worried about the climate, and then the people that are anti-climate change. And it's not about that. It's just better technology. It's cheaper, faster, less moving parts. There's so many different things about EVs, right?
So what you're saying is like the resistance that you see in the marketplace, either through talking with people or just watching the media,
I think it's politically motivated, most of it, right? Like I think it's I think they've used it as a political bone, and they've been tossing it around. But the switch to EVs, like if you could pull up this next chart, global EV sales would overtake ICE cars between 2026 and 2028 by the Rocky Mountain Institute as well, right? You kind of see that again, where ICE sales are already falling. Those are actuals. If you look at that top part of that chart there, and the ICE
I'm pretty
actuals,
sure
you see the sales of ICE cars are already falling, and you can see the EVs climbing, right? And most adoptions are not linear, right?
Yeah, no, right.
So if you see that, right, like if you look at that chart there, it's pretty dramatic, right?
It sort of hits a tipping point, and then
right. But I think it shouldn't be used as a political baton, right, between right and left and stuff like that, right? Right.
And so, do you think that this growth is happening because
they're just better cars?
Or is it because of incentives and?
Well, there's incentives, helps for sure. It speeds it up, but I don't think they need incentives. Tesla said that themselves. We don't need the incentives, but if you're going to give them out, we'll take them, right? But I don't think they're needed. I don't think they're required. Carbon tax isn't required either. There's many countries, if we go back a couple of graphs, we don't need to, but if we go back a couple of graphs, there's no carbon tax in the U.S., and they have a higher adoption rate than us. It's double what we have. So it's not carbon tax driving EV adoption. EV adoption is being driven by just better and cheaper. Right? Do you know what I mean? Like the cost of fuel obviously is driving it for sure, and that carbon tax adding to it is incentivizing people. The maintenance is next to nothing too, though.
Yeah, that's a shocker when you first get an EV, when you first are looking at it seriously, and you come to learn there are no oil changes. There's no
cooling system.
Yeah.
There's no muffler.
Like your tires and
no
windshield wipers, basically.
Yeah, tires, windshield wipers, and windshield washer fluid. You can add that every now and then.
But when you take away the cost of maintenance, the cost of fuel, it really does, balance out the higher costs you might pay for an EV even.
Yeah. And one of the other things that they talk about all the time is that, the grid can't support it. That's thrown around a lot, so that we're actually being, crazy and irresponsible by pushing all these EVs because the grid can't support it.
Okay, this might be somewhere where we sort of have some element of the disagreement, or not disagreement. I'm not convinced as you are on this point, but what's your best argument for that?
90% of the world's population lives in what's called the Sun Belt. 90% of the world's population, which is conducive to solar. I have solar on my roof, and so I generate more excess energy than I need. So if more people adopted solar, they would become their own energy producers as well. And they would get free energy from the sun to fuel their EV. So they're not taking from the grid, they're adding to the grid. So you got to factor that in. They're looking at it as an absolute number and saying, well, if everybody switched to EVs and there was no additional energy, we would overload the grid.
Yeah, and it took how many ever decades to build Site C dam, and we'd need X number of Site C dams to do this properly.
But there's other alternatives as well. There's SMR, small modular reactors, all kinds of things. But solar energy is there, right? Australia leads in that regard too, like the amount of solar that they have going on. So solar in Canada right now is offered at, you can basically get a free solar system on your roof with the grant from the government plus the 10-year zero interest loan, which will fund your solar panels. And I'm just not sure. We can do a show on that too and just talk about the whole solar process, because you can actually generate the electricity you need for home and for your EV, which makes sense, doesn't it?
It's like having
have your own gas station on the roof. The last we can get rid of that chart there. It's the EVs, and I'm just going to talk Tesla because I'm very familiar with Tesla because I own one. The cars are simpler. Like if you get inside a Tesla, it's very simplistic. It's very minimalistic, like hardly any buttons. Even the vents, there's no vents that you see. They're just smarter, more efficient, low maintenance. Did I mention smarter? But we do need diesel. Like I'm not an advocate for saying we don't need to have oil and gas. I think we absolutely do. We live in the second largest landmass in the world, and we need and tractors, trains, and transport trucks all need diesel, right, to transport our goods across this big nation, right? And there's no EV solution right now for large vehicles like locomotives and transport trucks or the tractors in the field. So it's not either or, and that's where I think a lot of people are getting it wrong too, right? It's not either or, right? It's like Elon Musk even says, drill, baby, drill, right? We need both. But the majority of consumer traffic can be EV. Not all, but a lot of it can be.
And a lot of last mile deliveries and all that kind of stuff. That'll end up being.
And then especially if you look at Canada, a lot of the population's on that lower part of Canada, right? So where it is EV conducive, right? So maybe the guy in Yellowknife, maybe it's tougher there. But the big news is Cybertruck has a launch date now.
Yes,
because that's one area that they didn't have was a pickup truck. Right now, there's an F-150 Lightning. You see a few of them around town, and then there's the Rivian, which you see a few of them around town too. And the Cybertruck, a launch date was announced today, so we'll start to see more pickups come. I think Chevy has one coming out, and there's more trucks coming. I'm sure a lot of people have more plans. The biggest thing that was the cost was, if we can bring up that battery chart, Marcy. People are saying the batteries are so expensive and that, but if you look at how the battery prices have come down. You can just see it in that graph, right? Like
it's interesting costs. They haven't. Now, I wonder what's happened here in 2019 to 2022. It's not been a dramatic shift there, but has capacity gone up? I wonder, because Moore's law,
right,
has been.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but
something for us to look into.
But if we look at the next chart Marcy has there too, this is what organizations, and we'll talk about the organizations, feel that EV adoption will be.
Whoa.
And you can see what some of them believe it will be.
So OPEC, they wouldn't have a bias, right?
Yeah, they're saying that the adoption will be really low because obviously they're interested in selling more oil and gas, right? So, but there's a few companies on the end. McKinsey is the one that Justin Trudeau uses all the time for consulting. They're a big consulting firm out of the United States, right? But you can kind of see that adoption.
But even Raymond James, look at that. That's Ernst & Young. I mean, those
Morgan Stanley really high on it too, right? They have really, they're big fans of the Tesla thing too, right? So British Columbia and Quebec lead Canada in EV adoption, which, kind of makes sense, right? British Columbia. Yeah.
Well, both interesting. Both countries have probably the strongest.
Lots of hydroelectric too, right? So they have the strong hydroelectric. I think if you ask most people, would they buy an EV? I think they would consider it at least right now. I think that's where most people are at. I think Auto Trader did a survey recently where they talked about that if people aren't buying an EV, they're sure looking. And I would suggest that they drive several, right? Like if you love the Ford brand or you love the Toyota brand or the whatever brand you like, go drive theirs and drive a Tesla and drive different vehicles and see what you think. Because I think Ford will do a deal. I believe Ford will do a deal with Tesla here, and I think maybe other auto manufacturers will do as well. Either they buy the software or license the software, or actually take a Tesla
mold
or the Tesla bottom of the car and put the Ford Bronco on top of it, right? Because I think a lot of people, like some of those vehicles, right? So I think that's coming. I think Jim Farley with Ford. And him and Elon get along. I think they're probably in discussions.
Well, and Ford would have been probably the most courageous and product and people forward domestic manufacturer through 2008, right? Like they.
Yeah, I mean their Lightning and their Mustang Mach-E are some of the more prevalent vehicles out of the big three. Yeah. Right. Those they're having some issues selling them right now. I think Elon kept bringing down the prices, so that they're having a tough time moving them at those prices. So, I don't know. And then obviously the UAW strikes has not helped. with that too, and Teslas are not unionized, right?
Yeah. Well, they seem to be the most positioned to.
Well, I mean, they've been doing it for 10 years or something like that, or longer, and the other guys are just catching up, right? Because it's like that iPhone moment, though, right? That's what I get back to, right? So, just like, oh, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. All of a sudden, it happens because iPhone didn't get created in a vacuum. Because BlackBerry had, like, the web, like, people were doing different things. They just did it really well.
So the Tesla, just to kind of like further expand on that, I mean, you're saying that because the Tesla is superior in so many different ways, I guess, right? And it offers so many different superior functions than a regular car.
Well, I think it's more of a computer on wheels, and whereas some of the other ones are more of an ICE car that has a battery pack. Do you know what I mean? Tesla has, I can't remember the millions of cars out there that are providing data for full self-driving. Do you know what I mean? Like that data is being provided back to Tesla for their Dojo computer. I mean, that alone, data, we know that with Google. Data is all important. So the more data you have, the more power you have.
How important do you think some of the other sort of capabilities of the Tesla are? Are they just oddities and things to curiosities, like its ability to survive a biochemical warfare?
I think those ones are a little weird. But I think that's his sense of humor coming out, kind of, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. But like the Cybertruck demonstrated that a Tommy gun could withstand a Tommy gun, or arrow from Joe Rogan. I don't know if that really adds. I think most people just want to know, can it get me to A to B? And will it be cheaper? Will it transport my family? And then I think somebody asked me this weekend, but are they safe? Well, actually, according to NHTSA, that does all the crash tests, Tesla Model 3 is the safest car in the world, right? Because of the crumple zone and stuff like that. You don't have an engine there in front of you that can kind of collapse into you, right? You have all this big crumple zone in front of you. And they're made differently, too, than anybody else. They're made with gigacasting. Remember Hot Wheels? So, yeah, gigacasting is they have this aluminum or plastic kind of thing, and they just push it into a mold, and they compress it into this mold and drop it on, I think, in like 90 seconds or something like that. And that's basically the whole bottom of the car. What used to be like 300 welds and bolts and stuff like that, and it took forever. Like they do it in one piece. So gigacasting they were laughed at for venturing into the gigacasting. And now I think Toyota just announced they're moving to gigacasting. I think some of the other manufacturers were like, hey, that's actually not a bad idea. And then the charging network. The biggest fueling station, if you want to call it that, in the world is now the Tesla supercharger system. And there was competition in the States. They were trying to build out Electrify America, and it just never worked, right? Because that's what you have to use something else, right? So since Ford,
I can get an adapter.
Yeah, since Ford was the first one to adopt the Tesla charging port, many others followed: GM, Rivian, Volvo, Polestar, Mercedes, Nissan, Honda, Jaguar, Kia, Hyundai, Genesis, BMW, Mini, Rolls-Royce, Toyota, Lexus, Subaru, and now Lucid, as of this week, or last week I think it was, announced that they're going to do the Tesla charger. British Petroleum, BP, announced a $100 million deal to buy Tesla superchargers to put them through the gas station. Another big gas station network in Europe announced another big deal to put Tesla chargers throughout their gas stations. So this is happening. Again, people think it's a political thing. It's happening. It's like these big gas conglomerates or oil and gas companies are not doing this because it's a political thing. They're doing it because it's happening.
Yeah, I was going to say they've really resisted it, haven't they? I mean, now they.
Yeah, but I mean, you either adapt to survive, or to become relevant, right? So I think.
I mean, there was that whole book. Do you remember, like, the electric car kind of came about in the 70s, and then
GM made one way back when. Yeah, I think in the 80s,
and it worked. And then it was like, who killed the electric car?
Well, they crushed them all. They actually bought them back and crushed them all. You can go on YouTube and watch it. You can find it. So they actually made an EV. They were leading in the EV world, and then they decided no.
And why? Was it because
no idea.
Couldn't make money off of oil and gas?
I wasn't there in the room when they made that decision, but it seems like a bad decision now. Yeah. At the time, maybe it seemed like a good decision, but right now it doesn't seem like the best decision in the world. So I think what we'll do in the future, though, is we're going to talk about solar panels, just on solar panels, and talk about that, because I think that's an opportunity for a lot of Canadians right now to get solar in your home basically free, right? Yeah. There's so many companies out there pushing for this right now, so do some research, make sure, and we'll try to go through the websites. I think we're going to have Gord Lovegrove come in. Mm-hmm. He's an engineering prof, and he'll talk about it and how you can get through that process. And then maybe hopefully we'll help some people put solar in their homes and add to our grid.
That sounds good.
From the grid. And then we'll do a little bit more on, we want to try and test drive a bunch of EVs too, because they will get better. All of them will get better. Toyota's, there's a guy on the internet that says there'll be two companies after, like in 10 years, Toyota and Tesla. Ooh, that's it.
That's a big.
I mean, that's his claim. He says Toyota's just too smart, and they've created so many good cars. And there was a survey that came out this morning in customer satisfaction with dealerships. Number one, Tesla doesn't have a dealership, but number one in customer satisfaction in dealerships, Toyota, because they treat their customers well. I mean, we own a Toyota Tacoma, so Toyota does a really good job with their product. I think you have a Toyota.
Yeah, we've got the Sienna.
There you go. So Toyota does a really good job with their stuff, and so he figures that they're too big to fail, and that they will just adapt, right? And they will figure it out. And you want to know who the worst customer satisfaction
I do.
is?
I'm kind of interested.
Are you?
Yeah. I don't know if I really.
According to this survey, it was Ford dealerships.
Really?
This is out of the States. This is a survey out of the U.S. So, yeah. So I think, I know that Jim Farley as well has said that he's got to figure out a way to make the dealerships work better for him, because Tesla has a significant advantage as well there with selling direct. And they're trying to prevent that in a lot of states in the U.S. by saying they're not allowed to sell in those states because they want a franchise. You have to sell through a franchise, so they don't want any direct sales. Obviously being pushed by some big dealership conglomerates, right? I mean, a lot of the richest groups in the U.S. are dealership groups, right? There's a lot of... you could look at it two ways. You could say, well, that's a lot of wasted money that the consumer has to pay for it because they're paying for all these extra things. But then you could say, well, that also employs a lot of people, and that money goes to building, puts money in the economy as well. So, I mean, different ways to look at it.
Yeah, and I think there will be a number of people who would be afraid to buy a car without having some sort of form of service in the marketplace. So then is that going to be Tesla direct and it's corporately owned, or is it dealerships?
Yeah, well, the good news for Kelowna is Tesla's getting a deal. There's a dealership opening here, or not a dealership, service center, delivery center they call it, delivery center, service center. Yeah, they do have a mobile service. I mean, I've had mine now close to a year, and hadn't had to do anything with it. So, yeah, we're getting the word from our boss there that wrap it up because we have another thing to do. So that'll be enough for today. So,
all right. Well, there's a.
Are you feeling energized?
I'm feeling energized. I feel definitely like we've got a lot of roads that we can go down, lots of topics that we can explore over the course of the weeks and months ahead of Energize, AI, solar, and of course EV and ZEVs or ZEVs.
Zero emission vehicles.
Yeah. So. This is a good primer, and things are moving quickly. So as news emerges, we'll be the first to bring you lots of that, perspective and news and information on this space. So look forward to having further conversation.
I feel energized.
All right. Until next Energized, we'll see you then.